Nobody likes a dirty cheater, am I right? Not only do they smell bad, but these days they also ruin every single popular online game they can get their hands on. I would bet $100 on the fact that you, the viewer, have likely played a game that was ruined by cheaters. They truly are the lowest of the low. And yet, it can feel quite good to have an unfair advantage over your opponent. Yeah, I know that you enjoy it too. After all, that's why we play these broken vehicles in War Thunder. That's why we buy overpowered premiums. But there is something in War Thunder that no amount of money can buy, and that is accurate information. The game does its absolute best to feed you as much misinformation as possible. I mean, by this point you should know that every single stat card in War Thunder is either incorrect or useless. Now consider just how complicated this game is, with dozens of elaborate systems all interacting with each other every match, and you realize that being informed is by far the biggest advantage you can get. So what if I told you that all this information is actually available for all to see free of charge? But you're not going to find it in War Thunder. Oh no, Gaijin would never do that. Instead, you have to look for it elsewhere, and I'm here to point you in the right direction. Consider this a follow-up to my Lies and Secrets of War Thunder video. You want to learn some secrets? Then let's get started. Let me begin with what I consider to be, without exaggeration, the absolute best online resource for War Thunder information you can find on the internet. The website is called StatShark, and it is full of cool features. How about a 3D model of a plane's RWR coverage? How about detailed charts that show you exactly how any given plane performs? How about a missile performance calculator? Or hey, what if you wanted to check the stats of some annoying guy who keeps talking trash to you? Well, StatShark will tell you everything about them, and it's much better than Thunderskill. If you aren't aware, Thunderskill is a very old website that also shows player stats. However, it has always been slow and broken, and it hasn't gotten any better over the years. This is me trying to see vehicle stats of a player. Yeah, this error is about all you can expect from it. Now then, let me show you how StatShark works. On the very top, we have player and squadron search. This is for when you want to check your stats or somebody else's stats. It's not case sensitive, so even though my name begins with a capital L, I can just type Linica and it finds me no problem. Now, straight away, you can see that, wow, you can like or dislike other people's profiles, just like on YouTube. The Profile tab is just a collection of your general profile stats, so games, victories, time played. Now, as you can see, I'm quite a naval gamer with 8 minutes in torpedo boats. And if you scroll all the way down, you can also see your position on the leaderboards. And surprise, surprise, you can also type comments on other people's profiles. Let's say, Linica, you are bad. Thanks. The next tab is rating, and this one is spicy. Here you choose between naval, air, or ground, and the website rates your performance, either all-time or monthly. Now, as you can see, my stats are, above average. However, I am still just barely holding on above 50%, and monthly I am below 50. So if you want to check your stats, I would be careful, because you might see a number that you would not like. Now, if you want to know how this number is calculated, the 100% is basically the best reasonably achievable stats in ARB in this case. They are set by the developer of the website. So I am 47% as good as, the best theoretical player in ARB. All in all, this rating is a good reality check for a lot of people. If your rating is above 50% on StatShark, then I salute you. You are probably a good player. And to everyone else who is below 50, well, keep going. You will get there eventually. The next tab is player sessions, and this one is great for people who want to keep track of their performance. How it works is StatShark takes a snapshot of your stats every time you visit the website. And then, once it has enough data, you can go back in time and see how well you performed. Let's look at a random period of time in my performance. 65%. I played a lot of different planes, didn't do all that well, 65%. Guess it's okay. And now let's go fast forward into the future. Look at that, I got even worse. So if you want to keep track of your stats, this is a good way to do it. The next tab is vehicle stats, and this is essentially the same as looking at your stats in-game. You want to see stats of a particular vehicle? You click on it, get vehicle history, there you go, detailed stats. Next is player and squadron leaderboards. Now they are kind of boring, but I do want to show you something in player leaderboards. So this is ARB, average player kills per game. So this is people who get the most kills every game. Now you might look at this and say, wow, 5.6 kills per game in ARB? That's insane. But let's look at the profile in detail. Now, straight away, we can see that this is a new account of somebody who is already experienced. They only created it to get rid of their old stats and farm new players, as you will see. Because if we look at vehicle stats, surprise, surprise, the only plane they use is BB-1, the 1.3 attacker in the Soviet tree. If you didn't know, BB-1 is the most popular plane for stat padding. People use it because it's 1.3, so it fights reserve planes all the time, and people who play reserve planes are usually level 0 noobs. So they take this plane, which has good guns, an air spawn, and a reasonably good flight model, and they just farm noobs all day, every day, and this is how they get these crazy stats. This is very bad behavior, and I honestly look down on such people, but, you know, it is what it is. You know, while we're here, why not make use of the features of this website? Let's dislike this guy and write a nice comment. Noob KB Farmer. There we go. Next is global player statistics. And this is good if you want to see how your average player performs in War Thunder. Right now it is set to a realistic kills per game. So as you can clearly see, the vast majority of the player base gets less than 1 kill per game. So if you do that as well, don't worry, this is normal. Next, we have probably the best feature of this website, which is the flight model calculator. Trust me, once you try it, you will not be able to go back. So how does it work? Well, let's say you're flying something like a MiG-17, right? And you want to see how it performs, at least on paper. And then let's say you want to compare it to something like a Sabre F2, which is F86 F2. So first you can select Info and press Calculate. This tab will show you the basic information about the planes you have selected. This info is from the game files, so it is always accurate. Now, all this isn't necessarily relevant to the gameplay, however, if you're interested, you can definitely get something out of it. Now, if we actually want to compare the performance of these planes, our first stop would be the Engine Performance tab. We press Calculate and we get this graph. This might look complicated, but it is extremely simple. First off, on the top here, we have two lines, which are acceleration in meters per second. Basically, how quickly your plane accelerates at a certain speed. So from here, we can see that MiG-17 actually accelerates quite a bit better, until about 900 kilometers per hour. So from this, we can judge that the Sabre is better at high speeds, while the MiG is better at low speeds. Now, down here towards the middle, there are also two lines which are simply the thrust of the engines of these planes. And at the very bottom, you can see the drag. Now keep in mind, you can also customize a lot of the parameters. For example, this graph is currently for 100 meters, so essentially sea level. Now, what if we wanted to know how these planes perform at, let's say, 5 kilometers? Now we can see that at 5 kilometers, Sabre actually doesn't outperform the MiG at any speed. So from this, we can learn that in the Sabre, you want to be low, ideally at sea level, while the MiG doesn't really care about climbing. Now, if you're more of a casual player and this is too complicated for you, you can simply go to the Time to Speed tab. This will show you the time it takes for your plane to reach a certain speed in a straight line. So here, the starting speed is 200 kilometers per hour. And let's say we want to know how long it takes for the Sabre and the MiG to reach, let's say, 800. For the Sabre, that would be 56 seconds. And for the MiG, it would be 45 seconds. So from here, we can judge that the MiG, in general, accelerates better. So if you want detailed engine information, I would recommend sticking to the Engine Performance tab. However, if you just want to quickly see how planes accelerate in general, you can use this tab. Now let's go to the juiciest tab, the one everyone is interested in, Turn Performance. Here it is. Okay, I know it looks scary and complicated, but trust me, this is not so hard to understand. First off, we have these two lines on the left, which are called a lift boundary. This is basically the absolute hardest turn your plane can make at a certain speed. So if we follow these lines, we can see that the MiG-17 can do its absolute best turn at 800 kilometers per hour, and that would be a 37.6-degree turn. Now, it's not looking so good for the Sabre. For the Sabre, the absolute best turn would be achieved at 835 kilometers per hour. Now, there is something you need to keep in mind about these lift boundary lines. They are rendered using full real controls or simulator controls. And when you play ARB, you're using the instructor. The instructor is flying the plane for you, and it has very hard limits. And basically what that means is that in ARB, you will not be able to pull 37 degrees at 800 kilometers per hour. Just keep that in mind. However, that doesn't mean that this graph is useless for ARB. In fact, it has these lines, which are extremely relevant. SEP0. What is SEP0? Well, it's your rate. And what the hell is rate? Well, let me show you. What you are seeing right now is called rate. Essentially, it is a sustained turn during which you keep both your speed and altitude the same. So this is me rating at 460 kilometers per hour. So, now that you know what rate is, these two lines represent how much you can turn at what speed without losing any energy. For example, if we look at the MiG-17 rate line, we can see that the best rate speed for it would be around 400 kilometers per hour, and for the Sabre, it would be around 500. Now, if we compare these two lines, we can tell that the MiG-17 will win the rate fight, because it can turn harder while keeping its speed. Now, so far, it's not looking too good for the Sabre. However, let's look at SEP-300 line. This is no longer rate. Negative SEP means that you are turning so hard that you need to lose altitude or you need to dive slightly to keep doing this turn. And as we can see, the Sabre actually does better than the MiG-17 in this kind of engagement. So what can we learn from all this? Well, we can tell that the Sabre will lose the long fight. It rates worse than the MiG-17, so it will inevitably lose. However, if the fight is quick and you are both dumping speed, then the Sabre has a chance. Now, let me show you something funny. There is this tab called Top Speed by Altitude, and let's use the Eurofighter as an example here. What we can see here are two lines. The first one is the maximum speed in a straight line at any altitude. So for example, here you can see that the Eurofighter at 500 meters will reach 1783 kilometers per hour. However, there is also this red line, which is the rip speed of the Eurofighter at any altitude. And as you have probably noticed, the rip speed is lower than the speed in a straight line. So the Eurofighter will destroy itself in a straight line unless it climbs above 7,000 meters. I think that's a little bit funny. Now, if you are mostly a casual player, then this is all you're gonna need from this calculator. However, if you are smart, then maybe you can also check out these tabs. I have no idea what this is, but if you're super smart, well, you will be able to get a lot more information out of this calculator. Now, one thing of note is that this flight model calculator only supports jets. No propeller planes support so far, and it breaks my heart, but it is what it is. However, if you are a jet player and your main weaponry is missiles, then let's take a look at this missile calculator next. You can use this one to compare how missiles perform against each other in different conditions. But first you need to set the launch parameters, and let me explain what they are. Start speed is your speed, so this is you flying towards the enemy at 1200 kilometers per hour. Next we have target speed, and this is whether the enemy is flying away from you or towards you. By default it's minus 200, which means the enemy is flying towards you at 200 kilometers per hour. Now the rest I think are very self-explanatory. This is your altitude, this is the enemy's altitude, and this is the distance between you. So now let's compare the missiles that I'm actually experienced with. For example, I am flying the MiG-23 and I am using R-24Rs. And let's say my enemy is the F-4J Phantom and it will be using the AIM-7F, which is the same as the AIM-7M. Now, if we actually calculate, this is what we see. First, the gray line is the distance to enemy. It is slowly decreasing because don't forget, the enemy is flying towards us at 200 kilometers per hour. And the two lines are the missiles. Now, we can see that both missiles will in fact hit from 15 kilometers. Now, if we compare the lines themselves, we can tell that the AIM-7F will hit first, because it has an engine that works for far longer. So in this case, it will hit in about 26 seconds, while R24R will hit in about 31 seconds. However, we can also tell that the R24R performs much better at shorter distances. Let's see, it beats the 7F up to about 9 kilometers. You can also confirm that by filtering y-axis elements and adding speed to this graph. And as you can see, R24R accelerates much faster, much better. However, AIM-7F keeps its speed better. So by looking at this graph, the moral of the story, if the missile has to travel 8 kilometers or less, R24R is better. If the missile has to travel more, then the AIM-7F is better. Now, how about we compare IR missiles? For example, in this case, R60 versus AIM-9G. I have also changed the launch parameters, so now both me and the target are traveling at 1000 kilometers per hour with me behind them, and the distance between us is 3 kilometers. So now if we calculate, surprise surprise, neither missile actually manages to reach the target. Okay, let's change the distance to 2 kilometers. Now if we calculate, you can see that the AIM-9G hits, while R60 just doesn't have the energy to reach the target even at 2 kilometers. Now, if we go all the way down to 1 kilometer, R60 finally hits. In fact, it hits faster than the 9G. So what can we gather from this? Well, 9G has much more range, while R60 will accelerate better at very short distances. All in all, this is a great tool to compare missiles on paper. If you play with these launch parameters, you can pretty much simulate any situation you want, and every single missile is available here, so go crazy. Last but not least, sensor view. This is, as far as I know, the only source of information about RWRs outside the game. Now, what is a radar warning receiver? This is that green circle on the left side of your screen that starts making funny sounds if somebody points their radar at you. Alright, so how do you actually use it? Well, let's use the Eurofighter as an example here. You just type the name of the plane here and add it to the list. Now, since the Eurofighter has both a RWR and a missile launch warning system, both have been added to the list. First, you have basic RWR information, all the bands it can detect, its coverage in 2D view, some miscellaneous information, and the planes it is mounted on. But you're here not for that, are you? I know, you are here for the 3D view. Oh yeah, this is amazing. So this is essentially full coverage. Eurofighter's RWR has no blind spots. And you might think that this is the normal, but no, it is not, and I will show you. Actually, before I forget, there is also this missile launch warning system. And what this is, it's this mechanic that tells you when a missile is fired at you. First of all, you have all this default information, and then you also have the area coverage, and you can see it in 3D as well. And this one actually has blind spots at the bottom and at the top. Now let's look at the competition, shall we? For example, Su-27SM. There's its RWR. And you can instantly tell, oh no, what is this? Let's see it in 3D. And there you have it. Look at these blind spots. Would you even know that they existed if you didn't use this tool? I have no idea how you would know that. Now, when you're looking at this, keep in mind that the colors matter. For example, the green that we saw before is the digital RWR, which shows you exactly where the signal is coming from. However, currently we're looking at the MiG-21 SMT, and its RWR is red, which means it will only approximately tell you where the signal is coming from. And now, how about something funny? Did you know that Su-7 had an RWR? Perhaps you did, but did you know which area it covered? Well, let's see in 3D view. Oh, would you look at this? Now that is interesting coverage. I guess it will tell you if there is somebody behind you with a radar active, but other than that, not the best RWR out there. So this is StatShark. As I said, I believe this is the best source of War Thunder information out there right now. Sure, it's not perfect. For example, the flight model calculator doesn't support prop planes. However, the work done here is absolutely amazing. So if you want to learn something new, I recommend checking it out. You might say, but Linika, I don't play jets. I only fly propeller aircraft. What do I do? Well, in this case, welcome to War Thunder Aircraft Performance Calculator. This website does actually support propeller aircraft. However, keep in mind, it is a lot more limited compared to StatShark. Even so, this is as good as it gets for us prop enjoyers, so let's get into it. Once you enter the calculator, you can only generate two types of graphs on this website, which is engine power and power to weight ratio. Let's start with engine power. So what is the use case for this one? Well, let's say you're flying LA-7. That's a good example, I think. And you want to know what altitudes your plane performs best at. Well, you click calculate and you see exactly what you need. So from this graph, you can instantly see that ideally you want to fight people at the lowest altitude possible. However, you can also see that when the engine changes into the second supercharger gear at around 4 kilometers, it helps to preserve horsepower up until about 5 kilometers. And this is really the only use case for engine power graphs. If you want to compare different planes against each other, then we have to switch to power to weight ratio. Now, keep in mind that there is a small problem with using power to weight to compare different planes, and let me illustrate. Here we have the Finnish Pyörömyrski and the 109 G2. If you look at the graph, you can see that G2 is clearly better than the PM1, up to about 5 kilometers. So if you just look at the numbers, it might seem like G2 is better than PM1, that it climbs better, for example. However, that is not the case. First of all, the airframes themselves are different. Different wings, different fuselage, the aerodynamics of the planes are different. Now, the second hidden problem is the propeller efficiency. You see, engine power by itself is only half of the story. You also need a good propeller that will convert this engine power into thrust. And it just so happens that Pyörömyrski has a much better propeller with higher efficiency. So when we combine all this, in reality, in-game, PM1 actually climbs way better than G2. And that's the problem with power to weight. You cannot use it to compare vastly different planes. However, you can use it to compare very similar planes. So we can use it to compare D-series P-51s, for example. They have very similar airframes and similar propellers, so there is no problem here. So if you look at the graph, you can tell that D30 is on top, with D10 following very closely, and D5 is trash, just like it is in the game. Now, technically, you can use power to weight to compare different planes to figure out which altitudes are best to fight certain planes. For instance, here we have a P-51C versus a Spitfire Mark V-B. Let's say you are flying the Mustang and you're thinking to yourself, at which altitude should I engage the Spitfire? So if we look at the graphs, you have two options. You either engage the Spitfire at 2 kilometers or below, before your engine starts losing horsepower, or seeing that the Spitfire performs much worse at altitudes, you climb as high as possible. Now this is the more boring option, but at least you have it. So while power to weight is not really a good way of comparing different planes, you can still use it in this makeshift kind of way. By the way, check this out. F8F Bearcat loses 200 horsepower by just climbing to 1 kilometer altitude. Who designed this? So this is War Thunder Aircraft Performance Calculator. Very limited, but still useful for us prop enjoyers. Now, I really hope that in the future, the creator of this website will incorporate not just power to weight ratios, but also thrust to weight ratios. I really, really hope. Now you might say, okay, Linica, this is cool, but I'm too lazy to visit these websites. I want more information inside the game. Geez, okay. Here, you happy now? This is War Thunder Real-Time Information, or WTRTI. It's a customizable overlay that displays information that is otherwise hidden. You might think it's only useful to nerds, but in reality, even casual players can benefit quite a lot from it. Let's take fuel as an example. War Thunder displays your fuel in the form of time you have remaining, and that's great if you always keep your engine at 100%. But what if you are flying a jet with afterburning engines? Well, you get this. And this is really bad. Like, can you tell exactly how much time I have left? I cannot, so this fuel indicator becomes kind of useless when flying afterburning jets. But here comes RTI with its own indicator. This one dynamically adjusts to tell you precisely how much time you have remaining. So whether you are flying at 20, 50, 100% or afterburning, you will always know exactly how long you will last. How about rocket boosters? Did you know that some planes have these cool rockets that you can activate to get a temporary boost? Well, that's exactly the problem with them. They have limited fuel, but you have no idea how much you have left. With RTI, you press a few buttons, and now you have a separate booster indicator that tells you how much life you still have in them. What about props? Did you know that a lot of propeller planes can only use WEP for a limited amount of time? P-51H is probably the best example. It's an absolute UFO on war emergency power, but it's kind of sad without it. Now, normally you have no idea how much magic WEP juice you have remaining, and you really don't want to run out of it in the middle of a dogfight. So what do? Use RTI to display exactly how much you have left. How about climbing? People always lose their minds because they have no idea what angle they should be climbing at. First of all, you should be climbing by speed, not angle, but for the sake of the argument, let's test angles. With RTI, you can enable the climb rate indicator. Take the plane you want to use and jump into a test flight. Let's use BF-109K4 as an example. You can tell that when I'm climbing at 25 degrees, the plane loses speed quite rapidly, which makes the climb rate go down. Now, when I'm doing 20 degrees, the K4 maintains its speed much better, which results in a better sustained climb rate. With one simple test, you now know that BF-109K4 climbs better at higher speeds, so pointing your nose straight up is not a very good idea. And again, if you know what you're doing, you can get so much more out of this tool. For instance, you can know exactly how well you're doing in a rate fight if you enable the turn rate indicator. Or maybe you've heard that late BF-109s lose thrust at low speeds. Well, enable the thrust indicator and go see for yourself. This tool gives you so many options, and it's up to you to pick and choose which ones you like the best. Now the big question. Linica, if this tool shows you hidden information, isn't that cheating? I don't want to get my account banned. After all, I invested 10,000 G into it. A fair question, and the short answer is no, you won't get banned. Two reasons why. First, RTI doesn't inject itself into the game or read its memory, none of that. Instead, it only uses information that is provided by the game itself. Don't believe me? Launch War Thunder, go into test flight or any other match, then open your browser and enter this URL. Would you look at that? There it is, all the information that is used by RTI. Second reason why it's safe is the fact that it has been around since around 2020, and the developers definitely know about it, as it even had its own thread on the old forums. They avoid talking about it, but the moderators say that it's fine. I also haven't heard about a single legit player who was banned for it. In fact, RTI is often used by players in official tournaments, so all in all, it's safe to use. Now, there is one small issue. It only works in borderless full screen mode, so if you're like me and you use regular full screen, you're out of luck. But hey, it's still an amazing tool which you should definitely try for yourself. If you have any questions regarding the things I mentioned in this video, drop by my Discord server. Last time we rated $1 ramen, so this time let's do a burger. At least I assume that's what it is. You know, they say you are what you eat. If that's true, my condolences to Mr. Scoodley. I hope it gets better. Thankfully for me, I am safe from such vile food thanks to my Patreon supporters. Joji, Nico, Habstadt, Luminosity, Hidora, Ben Kerber, Florian, Subvision, and CEO of Getting Snailed. You guys don't have to help, but you do, and for that I am very grateful. Now, I do have a few ideas for the next video, but in particular I want to test a certain mechanic in air battles that possibly gives a free advantage to certain players, while nerfing others. If it gets confirmed, I'm gonna have a lot to say to Gaijin. Either way, I love you, and I will catch you in the next video.